Thank you for joining us on this live stream at SAG-AFTRA on YouTube. To stay informed about all of our live stream and video events, please subscribe to this channel. Do it now. Welcome to the President's Taskforce on Education Outreach and Engagement live stream, Maintaining Balance and Wellness, produced in partnership with the Motion Picture and Television Fund. The presentation will begin momentarily. If you have questions that you would like to direct to today's guests, please email PTEOE@SAGAFTRA.org. That's PTEOE@SAGAFTRA.org. As a reminder, today's program is being recorded and you can watch the replay right here on SAG-AFTRA's YouTube channel. Now, please welcome today's host, SAG-AFTRA President Gabrielle Carteris.
Thank you, Pam. Hi, everybody. I hope that you're all staying healthy and emotionally strong. It's a very challenging time. I want you to know we're in the middle of TV theatrical negotiations right now, and I'm on a quick break, but I really wanted to jump on and say hello and tell you how excited I am about this webinar today. It's such an important webinar, particularly in the time that we're living in with COVID-19. But before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce our Executive Vice President, Rebecca Damon. Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, Gabrielle.
Thank you for being here. Rebecca is going to actually take over the moderation of the panel today after we get through this beginning part, because I have to go back to the negotiations, but you're in very good hands with Rebecca. So thank you for doing that, Rebecca. Before we begin, I just wanted to say I'm staying very connected to so many of you. Thank you for reaching out. You've really been communicating well. There is a lot of buzz right now about the business reopening, new safety protocols for productions. And I know that everybody's feeling very anxious, and I want you to know you're being heard. We are really working to complete the protocols for a safer return to work because, of course, for all of us, safety is paramount when we go back. Particularly, I want to make sure that our members are taken care of. So if you could please continue to watch your email boxes for updated communications about safety and returning to work. And of course, like Pam said, if you have any questions, you can email PTEOE@SAGAFTRA.org. That's PTEOE@SAGAFTRA.org. That being said, the pandemic, this COVID-19 moment that we're living in right now, has had an impact on all of our lives. And so we really wanted to do something different with today's program. Our programming to date has been actually focused mainly on giving you professional tools that you'll need to navigate not only through these challenging times, but as a result of these challenging times. We want everybody to feel that they're equipped with the tools they need to go back to work. But today, we also want to turn our focus inward on the collective community and the spirit of support and solidarity that is so important to our community as SAG-AFTRA members. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I've been hearing from, as all of you have, our friends, our family members, even from ourselves, that this is really a challenging time. The isolation, I know, is really starting to get to so many people. There are people who are writing to me, reaching out, talking about how they're lonely, wondering when work's going to come back, and it's creating an atmosphere of anxiety that we want to try to give relief to. So we wanted to take the time during this pandemic to say, and I hope you can hear this, you are not alone. We are in this together, and we will get through this together. And this is one of the ways we're going to do that. So we brought together these professionals who are going to be speaking with us today. They have experience in helping people to manage anxieties and fears, and they're going to share, thank you so much for that, their expert insight, tips for practicing good self-care, coping skills, stress reducers, activities that are not only meant to keep you busy, but actually to be food in some ways for the soul, right? Some way for us to really get through this time in a healthy way, to stay balanced, to stay focused, not only in our work lives, but our personal lives. So there's no better time to host the seminar as in this moment now. And there is no better partner than the MPTF, which is founded a century ago, which is, I think, really something that members aren't always aware of, a century ago by Screen Actor Guild members. And those members, some of the members that you might not even realize we're a part of the creation of that with Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. These are just some of the people who actually to help create this organization that helps us. So I'm really thrilled to welcome our panel. We have Dr. Scott Kaiser. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at the MPTF, along with his colleagues, Jessica Caughey, who's the Director of Campus and Community-Based Social Services, and Debi Conocenti. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Conocenti, right? Mm-hmm. Say it for us. So I say it right, Debi.
Conocenti.
Conocenti, thank you. She's an employee at wellness program manager. So to all of you, it is wonderful to have you here. I really am looking forward to this conversation. As I said, I have to go back to the negotiations, but I will be listening later to be able to hear what you all discussed. And so I would like to now just pass this over to Rebecca. I know it'll be a great webinar, and thank you all again for being here. I hope we can take something away from this moment and move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Really appreciate your leadership, not just in putting this together, but during this time to be able to have the steady, calm leadership. It's something we're all looking for in days like today, and I just appreciate you doing that. So thank you for kicking us off, and best of luck to you and the team. I just want to start out with all the panelists. Gabrielle just gave a little highlight about you with the title, but it would be great for the folks that are watching and listening at home to get a little bit of a sense of who you are and what you do. So if we could start that out, I'm going to start off. Go ahead, Debi. Why don't you kick us off?
Hi, everyone. If you don't mind, I would like to start with a collective deep breath.
We'll take it.
Get some stillness and just take a couple of deep breaths just to center.
That's great, Debi. We'll take those breaths.
Okay. So I'm Debi Conocenti. I've been working at MPTF for 5.5 years, and I manage the employee wellness program. And we have 450 employees that work very hard every day, taking care of our residents and doing everything that we do to keep our MPTF going. My background is in worksite wellness. I worked at Citibank, Kaiser, NBC, Universal, and Fox Studios, managing the employee health wellness program, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're really happy to have you, Debi. Scott, let's hear from Scott.
Sure. Hi, happy to be here. Scott Kaiser. I'm a physician specializing in geriatric medicine, which is the care of older people. I focus on brain health, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at MPTF. So as the Chief Innovation Officer, my role is really about assuring that we're having the best programs, best services, working with incredible teammates like Debi and Jessica to make sure that MPTF is really delivering on our mission, which is supporting members of the entertainment industry community and living and aging well with dignity and purpose, and in helping each other in times of need. So, I mean, you can imagine supporting each other in living and aging well and helping each other in times of need. I mean, we are living our mission every day, 24/7 on our campus and off in the community with all of the programs and services that we have to support industry members everywhere. Everything from kids to end of life, which I'm sure you'll hear more about from my colleagues here. And this is a tough time. This is a tough time. And it's been tough to see the impacts in our personal lives, people we've lost, but it does give me hope to see the way that communities can come together and the way places like MPTF and our team have stepped up to respond. So we're just glad to be here with all of you today to help us all, as Debi just guided us, take a pause, take a breath, and really focus on our self-care.
Thank you, Scott. That's great. Jessica, let's hear a little bit from you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Caughey. I'm the Director of Campus and Community-Based Social Services. What that means is I oversee a team of social workers who work here on campus in our nursing home and assisted living facilities, as well as social workers who work in the community in our geriatric case management program that services people 65 and older living in the community and provides wraparound services to them. I also work with our palliative care department, our behavioral health department, and our chaplaincy department. I've been at Motion Picture since 2007. I'm here in my office on campus today in Woodland Hills. And I thought I'd sit here because behind me on my wall are some fellow actors and actresses from some years past. We have Spencer Tracy and Jennifer Jones, but I thought it was a fun wall to sit in front of as I talk to your audience. So thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
I love the wall. Thank you, Jessica. They're beautiful and really inspiring to see a little bit of the history of your organization, and obviously those members played such a huge part, many of them in SAG-AFTRA's history as well. So it's a shared history and a shared, real beautiful legacy. So it's great to see those. They're comforting in this time to see some really familiar faces that mean a lot to our community. So you all told a little bit about yourselves, but I would love to just kick us off with a little bit about, are there things that you guys personally do before we sort of get into the meat of it in your day to either begin or end your day? Debi mentioned taking that deep breath, which I think is something I have to remind myself about every single day to make sure that I take those moments. But what about you, Jessica, or you, Scott? Did you guys have things that you want to have people, share your best practices?
So I guess I'll start, Scott. That's okay. I love exercise. I need to do some sort of physical exercise in order to sort of make my day complete. It's something that brings me peace and joy, and it gets me outside. So I like to start my day with a run or a walk or a stretch. It gets me energized for the day. It gets me going. And it's part of my routine. I think some of the themes that you'll probably hear me talk about today is creating routines and the importance of that during this very uncertain time. And so exercise for me in the morning is a vital part of my routine. And so I think if I were to say one thing, it would be that. That's how I like to start my day. That's a good one. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely add one to that. Exercise is so critical. I mean, in everything I do in terms of helping people live well, age well, it's the closest thing we have to a miracle drug. And ironically, I've actually been much more consistent about taking my morning run amidst the pandemic. I can't live without it right now. I just came back from my run right before this, and I think that's critical. And then just I try and keep up with all the incredible things that Debi is guiding us through with meditations. Headspace is free for everybody in LA County now, so there's sort of no excuse to be able to log on and then feel guilty about not meditating enough. I've got a friend, this is a curveball I would never have thought of, that, but it's really happening now. A friend of mine reached out to me, and she's been texting. We were talking about gratitude, because we know how important gratitude is and what a good thing it can be for your overall health and well-being. And she's texting me a daily thing about the things she's grateful for. And I mean, it's perfect for like sort of the lazy man's gratitude journaling, because all I got to do is do a little thumbs up on my iPhone to her thing. And then I feel like I got my dose. And because I stop and think about the things I'm grateful for, she probably would like me to respond, but I just thumbs up hers. And occasionally I'll ask her some follow-up questions or share something I'm grateful about. But it's really nice to have that reminder during the day to pause, especially with such uncertainty and so many emotional things in our lives every day, to just pause and take that breath and appreciate, where we are, what we have at the moment.
Scott, I am so glad you brought up gratitude, because that's one of my own self techniques. I'm coming to you guys from New York City, from my apartment. Like so many people, we're in quite tight quarters, and we're used to the bumping into people every day. That is something that, if you're a New Yorker, you really value that, but people everywhere are more self-isolated. One of the things that I do in gratitude every day is I join all my fellow New Yorkers and really people from around the country. We open our windows at 7 o'clock every evening and we clap together. We clap, we sing, we play music out the windows in gratitude for all of our first responders who we're so grateful for, the nurses, the doctors, those people that work in transit, the grocery store workers, just to feel that solidarity, to feel that connection, even when we're physically apart. To me, it's both gratitude and it's a source of such connection. So I don't care if you're a SAG-AFTRA member anywhere, anybody listening to this, if you could take your 7 o'clock and just clap in gratitude, even if it's the gratitude that you did that one little thing today that you wanted to do, or that you saw something inspiring, to just connect to that is so meaningful to me. And I feel like I'm with my whole city, you know, and it's a beautiful thing. So I love that you mentioned gratitude, because I think it does help us get through this. One of the things that our members are really talking about and had raised and it's something that's on all of our minds. You know, we're in a time where production is largely shut down. You know, so many of our members are not working, and, you know, it's just this disruption. There's uncertainty on all the different fronts that we all experience, you know, really around the world. But, you know, the financial, the not how to go back to work safely, the how do I schedule and organize my life? You know, these are some of those things that we're looking at and we're trying to cope with as individuals, and as a larger group. You know, how do we feel okay? And I'd love to have you all weigh in a little bit about what you're seeing, given the, you know, we have a very different work style, so many of our members, and, you know, all of us are trying to figure out what the situation that we're in is. So it would be helpful to hear from you guys, what you guys are hearing and thinking about that. And if you have advice for all of the SAG-AFTRA members today.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jessica. You're on the front lines of that, I know, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think in times like this that are so uncertain, that we've never experienced before, it's very easy to feel completely out of control. So many people that call our intake line that I'm talking to throughout the day, we talk about what we can control and what we can't control. And what we can't control is we can't control this virus. We can't control right now when we're going to go back to work. We can't control maybe when our kids are going to go back to school. Those are things that are out of our control. But what's in our control is we can keep ourselves safe from the virus. We know how to do that. There's been a lot of education provided to us about doing that. We know that we can be creative. You know, you guys are all very creative people. That's kind of your bread and butter. It's who you are. It's what you are at the core. So how do you harness that creativity to make yourself feel a little bit more in control? You routinize your day. That's something that you can control. You can get up at the same time every day. Like Scott and Debbie and I have talked about, you can incorporate things that make you feel better into your day, if that's exercise, meditation, things that give you pleasure. Get outside. Connection with people is extremely important. There's so many ways to connect. Obviously, there's Zoom and FaceTime, texting and telephone calls, but there's safe distancing connection that we can do. And then there's reaching out. I think giving of ourselves to others during this time makes us feel good. It makes the recipient of who we're providing things to feel good. So if it's helping a neighbor that might need groceries, if it's volunteering in some sort of way, these are all things that we can control. And so I think what I like to tell people is focus on what you can control and try and drown out the things that you can't.
Oh, Jessica, that's terrific advice. Debbie, did you want to jump in on that as well?
Yes, I just wanted to say that stress is perception. Mm-hmm. So anytime any adverse event or stressor comes at you, which it will daily, it's how we perceive it, and we can control that too. So it's not about controlling everything around you, but kind of just managing what comes at you and managing your perception of it. So you can turn a negative into a positive just by changing your frame of mind, and just reacting differently, not being in the negative, but looking at the glass as half full instead of half empty. And also just keeping in mind that things will change every day, and they'll keep on changing, and we won't have control. And we just kind of have to adjust to it. And that's our nature. And our mind's job is to solve problems. And that's what our mind wants to do, which is why some people find it difficult to sit still and meditate, because the mind is so busy. But in fact, you can teach yourself how to still your mind and how to move your thoughts from negative to positive.
Thank you, Debbie. As you guys are thinking about this, you've listed a bunch of self-practices. We had a question from a member. Is there other kinds of best practices that you guys would suggest in terms of the restoring self-balance? You know, do you have television restrictions for yourself, so you're not, look, I love our broadcasters, so I'm constantly watching them on TV all the time, but do you set personal limits for that? Do you set personal limits for screen time and other activities, or is it perfectly acceptable to binge watch our members on Netflix for the whole day? What do you guys think about when you are thinking about what are the good balance practice things? And I mean, I know it varies for everybody. We all have different dispositions, and we should take that all into account. But what are your thoughts on those kinds of things?
That's not a fair question. Of course, lots of screen time for everybody, as long as they're SAG-AFTRA members on the screen. Yes, lots of watch away.
All day long.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that Debbie and Jessica have a lot of good ideas about how to, you know, create balance and including your technology diet, you know, and how much screen time and the blue light, you know, and really being mindful of around bedtime. But yeah, so I'll throw it over back to them.
Jessica, did you want to jump in? You looked like you were going to.
You know, it's funny. I've had this ongoing conversation with my husband about the amount of time I spend on Zoom these days. And, you know, I think we might talk about this later, but Zoom fatigue is a real thing, right? And so being in front of the computer all day, being on Zoom, going home, then watching television, being in front of the screen. Again, you know, TV watching and movie watching, it's so relaxing. It's really fun. There's such amazing shows on right now. And it's a really nice way to unwind. But what I would say is you have to be mindful of it. So, you know, Scott mentioned, I don't like to watch anything on the TV like an hour before I go to bed, because it winds me up. Regardless, it just gets my brain going. I know that about myself. And I think with all of these tips, it's about knowing yourself. So I love to binge watch, and I will do that, but I will set limits for myself. Because again, going back to the basics, sleep is vital. So I know that if I get hooked on a TV show, I am going to be up until 3 o'clock in the morning watching it. I will guarantee that. So I know about myself, I shouldn't do that because sleep is important. So yeah, I mean, I think limit setting is important, but you have to know yourself and kind of what you can handle and what you can't is how I would answer that.
How about you, Debbie?
Well, I would suggest limiting your news intake to about 15-20 minutes a day, because if you're kind of watching the news around the clock, which a lot of us do, we want answers, we want solutions. It's probably not going to come today. So just limit your news time to 15 to 20 minutes a day.
Very good.
You know, I would just, before getting into the detail there, I'd love to go back to just sort of the bigger picture of what we were talking about. Debbie was talking about stress. And so much of what we'll be talking about today really boils down to inflammation and stress, right? Two factors. And so, yes, we will have stressors in our life. We have an undue amount of them now. So it's all about how we react to them, right? And stress actually can be very important. the evolutionary idea is that if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you want your body to kick into high gear to be able to get you to be able to run away as fast as possible. You need that adrenaline shot, and your blood pressure is going to go up, your heart rate's going to go up, and you need to race away. And then even the body has other coping mechanisms, like should you get bitten by that tiger, your body is actually going to be in a hypercoagulable state, meaning that your blood will clot more readily. So things are happening when you're in that stress response state where your blood sugar is going up, your blood pressure is going up, your blood can clot more easily. And obviously, inflammatory markers are going through the roof. So that's not good. That's not good under, that's okay for a short period of time, but that's not good when you have that chronically going. And when something like an email is triggering that, as opposed to a saber-toothed tiger, right? So we can't be living in that chronic stress state. So the kinds of tools that we're talking about today are the things that can help us mitigate that stress response so that we can cope in a more healthy way with stressors and not be in a chronic stress state. There's actually a relaxation response that we can induce with so many of these practices that we're talking about, where you can slow your heart rate down, reduce your blood pressure, reduce your blood sugar. And that's critical in, as I said, under normal times. But look, those are the things that are going to help keep our immune system strong, that are going to, protect us, from getting sick, and then also help us cope with illness should we get sick. And so many of the things that we're talking about that are the things that we know help us live well and age well under normal circumstances, like having a strong sense of purpose, having a great source of creativity and source of opportunities for creative expression, having really healthy, meaningful social connections in your life, having your attitude and your perception of your health and your aging actually impact your health and aging, right? So all of those things are true under normal circumstances. Our current situation has just upped the ante on all of that, because the level of the stressors and the level of the imperative that we cope in healthy ways has all been elevated.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'd like to comment on that. I'd like to follow up with, there is a researcher out of Massachusetts, Mass Gen. His name is Herbert Benson, and he wrote a book called Relaxation Response, which Scott, I think, was probably referring to. And he has been studying stress management and the relaxation response for 40 years. So I would definitely look him up and hear some of his research. What happens actually when you teach your body how to remain calm and still and meditate, the studies show, scientific studies of brainwaves show that you actually shrink the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that activates fight or flight. And you actually build up, I'm going to say, like almost a callus to stress after you have been meditating or practicing the relaxation response for a while. It can even be a week, but the benefits build up. It's like money in the bank. It's cumulative, the relaxation response. And if you keep practicing, you'll find that you will your reactions to things won't be as profound. You'll be able to handle different stressors in a way that you'll look at it and you'll say, wow, that really wasn't that bad. And normally I would have done such and such. So you actually notice these changes, these physical changes, physiological changes happen in your brain and body when you meditate. And when you don't have to do a formal meditation. You can even just do 10 minutes a day of just stillness. You can do something with your hands like knitting. You can even doodle, like just draw a figure 8 over and over again on a piece of paper. These relaxation response techniques make profound changes in the way your body physiologically responds to stress.
Yeah, that's awesome, Debbie. My wife, who's a psychiatrist and is kind of my wellness guru, she had the good fortune of studying with Herb Benson. And I mean, it's just amazing. You have to get that book, The Relaxation Response. But everything what's so great about it to me is that however many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, I've lost track, he was looking at doing this, and transcendental meditators came to him and said, hey, can you study us to see if it reduces blood pressure? And he was afraid to do it. He was at Harvard. He thought he was just like, this is crazy. People are going to think I'm a quack. I can't do this. And then it got to a point where he started to look at it. And he realized he couldn't afford not to look at this, that this was so important to our health and well-being. And he started studying this and created the Harvard Mind Body Institute. And what makes me so encouraged is how mainstream so much of this is now. So now, this is an opportunity for all of us to look at this knowledge, incorporate it into our lives. And then there are abundant resources available, many of which are available through MPTF, to really help tap in and take advantage for your own health and well-being and the health and well-being of your community. So it's an encouraging time in that regard, and I think we need it now more than ever.
I think so too. So are some of us, one of the questions that came in, people wanted to know, are some of us just more naturally prone to stress and anxiety? And are we even more prone to it now that we're not having, the social interfaces in person in the way that we used to? And how could you give us an understanding from your point of view about that? And maybe we'll toss that to Jessica.
Sure. I mean, I definitely think there's some personality types during this pandemic that are more prone to stress. I mean, if you think about the gregarious extroverts who really thrive off kind of being in front of a group, being social, being out there, I think I would imagine for them this time of more isolation might cause more stress or anxiety for them. I mean, just here on our campus, we have 153 residents who live in our assisted living community, some of which are very much introverts and actually love this time because they have, dining staff bringing them meals to their room and they can, sit and be alone. But we have a number of residents who are really struggling because they thrive off that, human connection and being in large groups. And I read an article in the New York Times recently that I think it was for a month period of time from February to March, the amount of antidepressant prescriptions filled in the US rose by 19%. So there's definitely, an increase in depression and anxiety during that time. And that's not surprising. So, I mean, I think right now, it's hard on many levels. Some of us aren't working. We can't make those connections with our loved ones. We can't hug them. We can't kiss them. We can't travel to be with them. The illness itself, that creates stress for us. But again, it's about finding ways that can bring us joy. So we've talked, Debbie and Scott talked about meditation. I've talked a little bit about, how can you bring joy to yourself? If it's helping a neighbor, I know there was a question, they're concerned about leaving the house to volunteer because of what they might bring back. Again, I think people are so creative and it's about harnessing that inner creativity to give back to the community. So is it making videos and sending them to people, much like Scott's friend who sends the gratitude pieces every morning? Is it about creating videos to send to your friends to share? Is it about organizing a movement from your home to reach people from the outside? So yes, I do think there's some personality types who might be struggling a little bit more, but I think we all are on some level.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things that in setting this up that Gabrielle and the PTEOE and all of us were talking about was the idea that we really want to send a signal to people in the best way possible that, to be able to have these conversations, because I think there's a lot of anxiety sometimes, especially in the professions that we're all in that tend to have a lot of public facing piece to it, that people have additional anxieties around that. And it leads me to the next question from one of the members. What if someone, when they ask you if you're okay, and you're really not, do you really tell the person what's going on? even if you know that they themselves aren't so great? What are the best practices around that? Jessica, could you help us with that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a tough question. And
We've got some tough members.
and one I've thought about a lot. I mean, sharing vulnerabilities and opening yourself up inevitably is going to make you closer to that person. So you really want to think about that first. If the person that you're sharing with is truly suffering, is sick, has just experienced a traumatic event, I would think twice about sharing kind of what's going on with you at that point. But that's not to minimize the fact that you need to talk about it. So I think it's important to acknowledge that you want to talk about a feeling that you're struggling with, but to be mindful of who you're talking to about that. And so I may caution people to open themselves up to someone who is struggling, and maybe to look to somebody else to talk about that with. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. I think we have to be mindful of who the recipient of our issues are at the time.
So that might be a time to use a resource through you all or other resources that are available on the city and state level. And so many of them are much more accessible right now, even from home. So that's helpful advice.
Yeah,
I would also say, I think you can reach out to friends and family. And I think, the question had to do with the other person on the end not doing well. So I think it's important to connect with friends. It's important to connect with family. And that's a huge outlet right now. And I would encourage that. I think what my point was just to be mindful of who the person you're talking with is, and can they kind of listen to you as much as you need to be listened to at that time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would just stepping back for a second, struck by what Jessica said about the rise in antidepressant prescriptions and whatnot. And look, we were already facing several crises in our country. We had a mental health crisis already. We had a loneliness epidemic already. So this viral pandemic has just exacerbated those issues. But the good news to me is that we don't need to go back, just like I was saying with the relaxation response stuff. I don't think we need to convince people about the importance of mental health. And, there's certainly more work we need to do to destigmatize mental health issues, but we need to just move beyond all that and help people respond. And there's so many more resources available now than ever, and more resources coming online every day, that we need to just start looking at mental health issues for what they are, and avail ourselves of the resources to act to help ourselves. And it's really hard because as you get, anybody who has experienced any of these issues, even if it's just mild mental well-being related issues, know that it's so hard as you it gets harder and harder to seek help the more affected you are. It's like a vicious cycle. And so that's where communities like ours are so important, to be able to reach out. And one of the questions I saw from a viewer was about volunteering. I think Jessica alluded to it there, about how can you volunteer if you can't go out right now. And, there are still things you can do. As Jessica said, there's so many things you can do that you can organize from your home. I know my kids are loving, SAG-AFTRA had a story telling program, and my kids are enjoying those stories every day that members are reading books to kids. So many things you can do. At MPTF, we actually have several programs that give people an opportunity to volunteer by telephone. All you need is a telephone. That's it. And you can reach somebody else who all they have is a telephone, and you can create a meaningful connection that is going to enrich the lives of both of you. We have care calls where we call out to thousands of industry members to check in and see how they're doing. We have a daily call sheet program for ongoing social calls. And oh my gosh, the stories of how this has changed the lives of the people making the calls, the people getting the calls. I mean, it's just one of those kind of virtuous cycles that we need more and more of. We need it now more than ever. And all you have to do is go to mptf.com, call us, and we will help you get on the road to doing this good work that will help you in our community.
Scott, I love that you brought up the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Storyline Online. It really is our signature literacy program for the foundation. And one of the things that members have always had that as a way of giving back. And that's been really critical. But the amount of eyeballs on that has never been more, whether it's our own members showing, hey, let's look at Rita Moreno and Debi Watt, all these people, Chris Pine and Clark the Shark. People are loving that. I will tell you, I have our adult members who sometimes just want to connect into something. There's that moment of connectivity. I have heard from friends and members around the country mentioning how they love that program. Even for themselves, they watch it with their kids. They don't need to have kids to watch it. But it is that giving back. And all of those opportunities, it's one of those things where we really want for people to feel connected. So I love that. I know you guys do some senior buddy stuff with our MOVE committee. These kinds of things are just, there are ways to still contribute. So I love that you mentioned. Did anybody else want to jump in on the volunteerism? Jessica or Debbie, did you want to jump in with other things in that area since Scott brought it up?
Well, Jess?
Go ahead.
No, I would just like to say that things like volunteerism, altruism, they are the same as gratitude when it comes to someone's feeling of overall well-being. You will feel so much better when you volunteer and when you help others. So that's a scientific fact.
I like that. Jessica, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just thinking of ways I know people have reached out that, don't feel comfortable physically going out or gathering people together, as my son's class started a letter writing campaign. And so all the kids in his 4th grade class actually pen and paper, write a letter. And then the teacher collects them and sends them to different assisted living facilities, to residents in those facilities. So it's really small, simple things that people can do to volunteer and feel like they're giving back, but connect in new ways that they maybe haven't done in a while.
Yeah. We also have had questions from people who have limited access to family and friends. I have several folks that I know who are, they're in their apartments or their homes and they're alone. And what are the techniques that you guys think about in terms of during this time when people are physically isolating? What are the strategies that you guys recommend to people, especially in those situations, which is a lot of people?
Rescue a pet.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was going to say rescue a pet if you don't already have a pet or two. These times where we can't touch, human touch is very important. And, these times where we can't touch, even shake hands, we're missing out on that. And Zoom helps us to connect, but not in the way we want to as humans. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I would just say, so social isolation is really hard, period. And there's a lot that we know about social isolation. I give an example. They've done simulated missions to Mars and had, simulated astronauts on these long confined missions and studied the impact of that prolonged isolation and lack of contact with other people, literally away from Earth, right? And so there's a lot we know about, or submarine, missions or things like that. And so one thing is that when they did the simulated mission to Mars, they saw that people's physical movement went way down on the trip back. So the longer they were isolated, the more sedentary they became. So let's go back to basics here and remember, good diet, good exercise. You've got to push yourself on those things. And you're sort of fighting gravity inertia, the longer you're isolated, the more sedentary you're inclined to become. And we just know that. So it's okay if that's happening. Don't worry about it. Start with small steps, right? All behavior change starts with small steps. What's the saying, right? That the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I mean, health behavior change is really hard. It's really hard to change our ways, change our habits, but we do know a lot about what works. And one of the things is breaking it down into bite-sized steps. So just make a small thing, just decide to do, one jumping jack, go out and take one walk, whatever it is, to just build up that muscle of movement and getting into a healthy routine. But back to the isolation is separate from the issue of loneliness. So we can be isolated and not feel lonely, or we could be in a group of a ton of people and have tons of contact and still feel lonely, right? They're correlated, but they're not the same. Loneliness is like thirst when you need liquid, or hunger when you need food, right? It's a signal from our bodies that we're craving that kind of human connection that we need, that we're sort of evolved to have. And so loneliness, it ends up, is very bad for you, particularly chronic loneliness. The health impacts are on par with smoking almost a pack a day. When you look at retiree health, you see that chronic loneliness is the biggest predictor of health issues, functional decline, meaning ability to act independently or not, and premature mortality, early death. So that's under normal circumstances. Now, more people are isolated and more people are feeling lonely. So we've got to be very keen on looking for those signals and responding to that signal and reaching out and making connection. And so while telephone isn't a panacea, or Zoom's not a panacea, it's a good place to start. That's why we've created these telephone connectivity programs, so that because the more connected you are, then the more you feel empowered and enabled to reach out to those other resources that are all around us already and tap into them.
Thank you. Jessica, did you want to add into that?
I mean, I think Scott,
He did
Scott kind of covered it all. I think, the only other thing I would say in terms of ideas is, connection with old friends, right? We are all so very busy in our lives, and this pandemic has kind of slowed us down almost to a stop. And it's really allowed us to have some time on our hands. And I think it's an amazing time to connect with old friends that you really just haven't been able to connect to in the past. And so, if for some reason maybe you don't have a lot of family, or you don't have a lot of friends at this time that are available, is there someone from the past, that you had a nice friendship with, that you enjoyed talking to, that you could just reach out and touch base with again? It's a good time to do those types of things.
I have just one more thing to add to that. At MPTF, we've been utilizing FaceTime quite a bit because we're following CDC guidelines, and unfortunately, we're not allowing visitors to come on campus. But we're using iPads and FaceTime for families to connect with their loved ones, and it really does make a difference. It's not human touch, but they're so much happier when they're able to see and talk to their loved ones.
Well, Debbie, you had, a great experience with that, being on our COVID positive unit with families who couldn't obviously come to see their loved ones, excuse me. And you were right there holding the iPad with them so that they could talk with them.
Yeah, and it really made a difference. They, they felt isolated because they were, because we're purposely isolating them. But the iPad was a great tool.
That's a great point, Debbie. I feel like all of those things are so helpful. We are hearing from a lot of our members that they have had a hard time sleeping. You want to give some practical advice about that? You mentioned earlier about screen time right before bed. What are the other best practices? I'm going to have you jump in. Debbie, you look like you're ready to go. Why don't you give us some advice?
I'm going to refer you to another researcher. He wrote a book called Why We Sleep. He's out of Berkeley, and his name is Matthew. Oh, I'm going to get it for you. It's not on the tip of my tongue, but it's Why We Sleep. And he is a brilliant researcher on sleep. And it turns out that we all kind of know this from the media, that we don't get enough sleep, but he explains the reason why we need to and how it hurts us that we don't get enough sleep. And some tips that he recommends are, the ones we've heard before, like going to bed at the same time every day and waking up at the same time every day, limiting your screen time, not having a heavy meal before you go to sleep. People think alcohol might help with sleep, but in fact, if you drink alcohol before you go to bed, you're going to have a very restless sleep. You're not going to get into a deep sleep. And the next day, you're not going to feel well because of that. And also one other recommendation he makes is to set an alarm clock for bedtime. So I know, like Jessica was saying, she'll binge watch until 3 a.m. And a lot of people
not every night.
Not every night, but my husband's guilty of that too. And so, but you can set an alarm for bedtime just as you can set an alarm for waking up. So just to remind yourself, that the show will be there tomorrow, and you can dig in the next day. So those are just some basic tips. And then obviously avoiding caffeine. Some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others, depending on your physiology. But certainly no caffeine after noon, after 12 o'clock is recommended.
It was Matthew Walker, Debbie. Matthew Walker.
Thank you.
There you go. Teamwork. Any other bedtime or sleep tips?
I think rather than specific tips, I would just say, look, it's hard. I just can't stress enough how important good sleep is to our overall health and well-being. It's so critical. It's important for our attitude, our emotional health, and our physical health, right? It impacts our immune function, everything. And it can be really hard. I'll be honest, I had trouble sleeping. I usually sleep very soundly, a full night. I'm blessed with great sleep. I had trouble sleeping last night because I was just worrying about issues. There's just so many things to worry about right now. People's lives are literally hanging in the balance on so many fronts. And I was worrying, and it's really hard. And I tried all the things of the meditative approaches and, getting out of bed and writing down some of the things I was preoccupied about, but it can be really hard. I think the good news is, again, there are so many resources out there, whether it's books like Debi pointed out, or, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's psychotherapy for insomnia that works. So if you have the kind of sleep hygiene things that Debi was talking about, and you avail yourself of these resources, many of which even before the pandemic, you could get through telemedicine, you could get online, and you can definitely get online now, do it. Don't suffer chronic insomnia. It's bad for your health. Do something about it, because the answers are out there. And don't go for the quick fix, easy cure of sleep aids. Things like, a lot of people will go for over-the-counter stuff that's got mostly diphenhydramine in it, that's just sedating. That's Benadryl. As a geriatrician, that's like our enemy number one, right? These sleep aids, over-the-counter sleep aids, they increase confusion, increase risk of falls, have so many negative side effects. And they also are disrupting your sleep architecture. So you're not really getting that good restorative sleep that you need. And then, of course, things like Ambien, Lunesta, all of those sedative hypnotic medications, again, they can help on occasion, but taken chronically, it's really concerning. And I know so many people take those chronically, but we've really got to turn that around. And there are better ways to help with sleep than that particular pharmaceutical approach.
So shifting, Jessica, did you want to add something to that?
I was just going to add two things, and I'm sorry, Debi, if you already said these in terms of the hygiene piece. I know for myself, a dark, cool room is also important. So making sure the temperature in your room isn't too hot. And then exercise. While we say exercise is important, you really shouldn't be exercising right before you want to go to bed. And you know, it revs up our body, it revs up our mind, and it's hard to kind of come down from that. So while exercise is important and you should do it, being mindful of how close you exercise towards bedtime, I think is an important thing to keep in mind. Meditation's great, breathing and maybe some light yoga, but not any sort of rigorous exercise.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm glad you brought up exercise. One of the things that our members are asking about, I'm seeing some questions about exercising outdoors and how safe it is. So there's some stress and anxiety around that. And, you know, how do you take time to get out of the house? What are the best practices that you guys would give around this in terms of how to reduce stress and anxiety about doing things that might be very helpful, but might also trigger other concerns? If you guys, can I get some feedback on that one? Because we've got a few questions about that.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. There are a lot of outdoor activities that you can do safely now. The cities are now opening up their parks again, and people can even go out and play golf and play singles tennis in LA. But like Scott and Jess were saying, I can't start my day without my morning run too. And it's perfectly safe. Wear a mask to protect others, but go out and do some walking, do some running, do biking. These are all safe things to do outdoors. I can't speak to the science of COVID, maybe Scott can, but you can get a little handy. I just ordered these yesterday and they arrived this morning. Just a little handy thing that you just put it over your head, and then it acts as a face mask, and then you can wear it while you're exercising. So,
and you look cute too.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's just, look, it's about the mask to protect others, and it's about social distancing or physical distancing, right? I mean, look, there's so much unknown. It's hard. When I was training in residency, one of the doctors who was training us said, you know, embrace the gray. Nothing in medicine is black and white. And we're so used to, you know, doctors coming on TV and saying, do this, do that. And, you know, this was the first time that I saw Sanjay Gupta just say, like, I don't know. Nobody knows. We don't know. But the good news is, amidst so much that we don't know, we really do know quite a bit about the transmission of the virus and understanding how it's spread through droplets and contact, right? And so once we understand that, we can take, it's all about reducing our risk, reducing the risk of spreading in our communities and reducing our own risk of exposure. And exactly what Debbie was talking about is what we can do. You know, when you go out and you're outside, maintain that distance so that people's droplets, like when they talk, when, you know, little droplets come out and then they disperse and they land on things, right? So you want to stay in your zone. You don't want to be in other people's droplet area. And if, should they cough or should they sneeze or something like that, it's, you know, the majority of them would be limited within 6 feet. That's kind of where that comes from, right? So you want to sort of keep your droplets to yourselves, people, right? And so avoid other people's. And then, of course, their droplets land on stuff. So you want to be careful about what you touch. And then when you touch stuff, you want to wash your hands a lot. I mean, I know Anthony Fauci's been saying this every day, all day for months. So I'm sure I'm not saying anything that people don't know. But yet people still are not washing their hands enough. Warm soap and water, you know, good 20 seconds plus. Hand sanitizer is good too, but not as good as that good warm water. So you just got to be mindful. If you go out and run and you touch something, you know, before you touch your face, where you could introduce it to yourself, wash your hands. But exercising outside is wonderful. And it's very important that we do it safely for ourselves and are respectful of others. I love that I go out running and I see people give each other space. The likelihood of sort of running in the trail of somebody else and being exposed to their droplets just because they're so low out in the fresh air that you can really reduce your risk so that you can safely do that. And it's very important. Oh, I think we lost you, Rebecca. You're muted.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question about flu shots coming in this fall. Obviously, people are hopeful for a future vaccine, but that's not the moment that we're in. People are curious about flu shots this fall, and will they be more important than ever in terms of this? And they want to get the, I think this is a question for you, Scott, to talk about flu shots and their role during the time of the pandemic.
Absolutely. I mean, so one of the challenges of the pandemic is that a lot of people's routine health things are being deferred, right? So you still got to take care of your health, and life goes on. You have to protect yourself from everything. And you certainly want to protect yourself from flu, and flu shots work. You know, MPTF is always involved in helping get flu shots out to industry members, particularly here in Los Angeles. And I'm sure we'll be involved in that again. And we're always encouraging people to get flu shots. It's extra important for the people that I typically work with, because if you're older and you have chronic conditions, then you really want to get a flu shot. And guess what? Same people who are at risk, highest risk for COVID-19, right? Older, multiple chronic conditions. So you want to make sure you've got good health maintenance overall. And that's a critical part of health maintenance. Even under normal circumstances, the flu still takes many, many lives. And it's heartbreaking because so much of that is preventable through vaccination.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions that have come in before we wind down. We have a question about how they are seeing that, you know, there is that stress response, you know, like to unreal threats, like email that you mentioned before. Somebody referenced that. This person is having trouble both de-stressing and motivating to face the stressor, like the email. And, you know, they say their wife say that stress can help her focus, but it doesn't work for this person like that. So what are your suggestions around that?
Debi.
You can take a stab at it, or Debbie.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm understanding the exact question.
I think how people respond. So some people seem to thrive a little bit, or say they thrive off of stress. If you're not one of those people, but you still have to do the email because you're still, how do you manage navigating those moments? I'm just reading the person's question.
Yeah, Jessica, I know you were mentioning how everybody's different and sort of knowing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it is a good question. I think some of us do thrive off stress. It kind of kicks us into overdrive and motivates us to get going. And then there are people who are really overcome by stress. There's an idea called radical acceptance. It just means that, you know, Scott was talking about small steps. The first small step is just acknowledging the reality of the situation, right? So if we can acknowledge the thought, if we can acknowledge the stress, it makes it real rather than kind of just keep burying it. Because if we keep burying it, all of these stressors are going to accumulate to this mountain that's going to feel just completely overwhelming to us. So if we can start by small steps of, you know, I think he suggests an email. Could you check one email? Just one. Just open up one email and read that. Because fighting the reality of not checking your email, I'm using that as the example because that was talked about, is really only going to create suffering. And, you know, pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So if we can take that one step, and in this case, it's an email, and just open that email, that's really all you need to do for, you know, if you want to just do that for that day. And then the next day, maybe take some action on that email.
That's awesome, Jessica. I love that because, you know, look, it reminds me of when, you know, with our first child, we took one of those classes preparing for childbirth, and they were like, whatever you do, you know, don't tell your partner relax, right? Like, I mean, that's the worst thing you can do. Somebody's in labor, you're like, relax, relax, it's okay, right? No, 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 no. It's not. There's so much misperception that like, oh, we're gonna go to this retreat and we're just gonna like, we're gonna bliss out and like, yes, all our worries will go away and like, no stress, man, it's all good. No, it's not about like repressing the stressor. It's actually, so many of these practices are really about sitting with the stress, existing with it. And then I'm just talking about curtailing that physiologic response, but there's a whole, you know, social, spiritual, psychological component. I'm just talking about how do you not have it cross over into where it's making your blood sugar go through the roof and your blood pressure, and it's damaging your blood vessels and increasing your risk of a heart attack and increasing your risk of a stroke and increasing your risk of getting sick with a respiratory illness, right? But it's not about denying it. It's about actually sort of confronting it with some level of comfort and as Jessica said, taking it step by step.
We have a question also about, you know, anxieties about the future resumption to work. The member notes that they're really happy to hear that SAG-AFTRA and the DGA and IA and others are working on protocols for a safer return to work when as things evolve. They're curious about the anxiety that's associated with that, because I think there is both a real desire. People want to go back to the work that they love, but they want to do it safely. So from your perspective, in terms of the component that you deal with as we're working through those protocols, what are the things that you would want to talk to our members about that? Because I know that's a topic that's on everybody's mind. Go ahead. Well, I think yeah.
I mean, I'm actually facing that with some of my staff who are returning to campus to work. There's a lot of anxiety around that. And I think the more we can educate ourselves about what we can do to keep ourselves safe helps to decrease that anxiety. So one of the things that I did for my staff is I set up a Zoom Q&A with our nurse practitioner here on campus so the staff could ask questions about how can I keep myself safe? What are some safe practices that I can do before going to work and then coming home? And it allows people to share their collective anxieties, but also get answers to questions that they might be struggling with as it pertains to returning to work. So I would say educate yourself, seek out advice from your doctor, seek out advice from your supervisor, and arm yourselves with the tools that you're going to need to feel better when it is time to return to work. Because again, it's about what can you do to control the situation. I can educate myself. I can wear a mask. I can wash my hands. Those are things that you can do.
Yeah,
we also have a lot of.
There's two parts
I just also
to
got
that,
a
really.
question.
Go ahead.
Could I just add to Jessica? I just wanted to say, I think in the industry with SAG-AFTRA, there's so many unknowns about what the future is going to look like. What are the sets going to look like? How do the actors interact with each other? How do we have all these people together on a set safely? And I think, the producers are all worried about, how they're going to manage that. And the fact is that we don't know yet. So that's still all in the planning stages. What are the studios? How are we going to control for all these unknowns? And I think that it's just a matter of kind of trusting that it will work out. But it's not going to be business as usual for a while.
I think there's multiple parts to that. Yeah, there's the unknown. There's just still so much unknown. And then there's what you can actually do, what we know to protect yourself, coming back to that. And then there's just the anxiety part. We were dealing with a mental health crisis before COVID, and it's going to be much worse now. So we really need to all work to create a culture where we normalize mental health issues, and we assure that everybody has access to mental health resources. So if that's something that can be positive I know silver linings are sort of trite and overplayed these days, but if that's something positive that could come out of all this, that we have safer workplaces, including mental health safety and awareness, I think we should all be moving in that direction. And that if people are feeling anxiety, it's a signal to do something about it. And there are resources available, and we need to make sure they're available to everybody in the industry.
We have just a couple little quick wrap-ups here from a broadcaster who has been on the front lines in the hospitals, helping cover this story in a lot of those situations. And there is a lot of anxiety in being in those situations while they are delivering the news and keeping us all connected. Do you have any particular advice for them? Why don't you go ahead, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very tough. There's so many people who are having to be out there on many front lines. Right. This is a battle that's being fought on many front lines. I don't think we've said enough in this call to celebrate all of the frontline heroes out there, and it's just amazing that we have those very heroes at MPTF. You know, that we've dealt with a COVID outbreak on our Wasserman campus. We have people who are putting themselves in situations where they know they are directly, like Debi, who were knowingly directly exposing themselves every day to COVID-19. But, you know, Debi's here. She took measures to protect herself. That's what we all need to do. And, you know, broadcasters are critical too, that we all need information, quality information right now. And we all know the everyday heroes in our day-to-day lives that help us in so many ways, you know, get ourselves fed and to be able to go on. So when it comes down to it, everybody has a different level of risk based on their own health and situation. And then people have different levels of risk based on the kind of work that they have to do. But the good news is we can all take measures to reduce our risk. And then it really comes up to, I hope that those broadcasters can channel their energy into helping do what we really need to do, is create a collective spirit where everybody's playing their part to create a stronger community. And it's hard because so much of what's protecting me and protecting you comes down to the personal responsibilities and behaviors and actions of others. So we need now more than ever to create communities where everybody plays their part, to step up, to do the right thing, to be responsible. And hopefully broadcasters can continue the great work they've been doing, driving that essential perspective and behavior.
Yeah, there's a follow-up saying that they were grateful for all the work of SAG-AFTRA staff and leaders for all the extra protections. And I think that's true of every area of work for our members. And I think it's just important to relay that as a union, that is something that is, you know, our highest priority is the safety of our members, the safety of our community, and the safety of everyone. That is a huge focus. So I was grateful for that comment. We have one last question, and it has to do with people who are not sick, but know people who are sick within the creative community. We've obviously lost a great deal of people. Some of those things are clear in public. They're the people that we all know and love. I've personally lost friends former board members, things like that. What is the best mechanism to not deal with the guilt of being a survivor in this moment, and the want to sort of give back into the community? What is the best way to handle those moments? Scott?
Jessica, I'm looking at Jessica.
Oh, Jessica. All right. Yeah, you were nodding.
Like no, it looks like she has nice. I'm nodding because I'm just, you know. Yeah.
We are awaiting Jessica's good thoughts. Go ahead,
of course,
Jessica.
I have something to say about it, but I'd like to hear what Jessica has to say about it.
I would too. Go ahead, Jessica.
I mean, I would say celebrate the life of the individual. You know, the people that you lost. I would say celebrate their life, talk about them, bring people together to remember them. I think that's extremely important during this time. We can't, you know, physically gather, to remember people or to say goodbye to them, but I think we do have to celebrate their life and acknowledge their life in some way. And so I would encourage people to do that.
That's a great,
Yeah,
that's a great.
there's an
note.
expression about turning poison into medicine, right? And it's just, it's such a hard time, and there's so much grief. And even if you haven't, I just want to acknowledge the grief that so many are feeling. Even if you haven't directly lost someone, just all of the collective loss can be very painful and triggering for a lot of people, because we've all had our own relationships with grief in different ways. But I think it's about really pausing, as Jessica's been saying, as Debbie's been saying, and finding ways to work through some of that and to channel some of that for creative expression, and to encourage you to do something positive, to give back, to help your fellow community, to somehow channel that into a positive force for good. You know, that's what we really need right now. There was something on an NPR project where people were contributing poems about grief. And I was just so moved just by, you just get into the depth of so many people's souls out there as they express their feelings. I mean, this is what it's all about at the end. We need to wake up to this, that we live so much of our life sort of racing through from thing to thing to thing. You know, when do we pause to figure out what really matters most to us in the end? And when you look at the stories, you know, of the people whose lives have been lost, you know, what really mattered to them? What mattered was their relationship, the love they had within their families, the contributions they made to their community, you know, their attitude, their spirit. That's what we need to be moved by. That's what we need to help celebrate and live on and really channel in our own lives. So I'm just glad that there are, you know, groups like MPTF that are helping bring community together, because it's a hard time.
Thank you.
I would like to add, you know, with the Survivors Guild, if people are really feeling overcome by that it's extremely important to reach out for help. You know, whether that's with a chaplain or a therapist or a friend, really acknowledging that feeling and getting help around it is extremely important, because you don't want to carry the burden of that guilt for very long. It can be detrimental.
That's a great place to close, Jessica, to remind everybody to reach out, to ask for help. The MPTF has a lot of resources. We have additional resources on our COVID-19 page for SAG-AFTRA on SAG-AFTRA.org, with also state and local resources. So no matter if you're listening to this in California, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, or anywhere in the world, we want to encourage people to reach out. I really want to thank you guys for all of the information that you were able to give us today. Also, the enormously big and caring hearts with which you do it. Your kindness just comes through in your commentary today. And I always ask everybody to take a moment to be extra kind. And I'm going to ask everybody today who's listened to this program to do one small thing just to give back, whether that's calling a person you haven't heard from for a long time, sending a little note, writing that poem, whatever it is, do one good thing and make that your first step. I really want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the PTEOE, the President's Task Force on Education, Outreach, and Engagement. Make sure you check out all of our other panels on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the channel right there, and really appreciate everything. I want to thank everybody for being here, and just from all of us at SAG-AFTRA, we're thinking of you and you're not alone. Thank you.